I spent 4 months grieving a man who was very much alive. I found out on a Tuesday, watching my dead husband order a coffee, 2 sugars, the way he always took it, through the window of a life he'd built with my money and my best friend, on the grave I had paid for. This is the story of how I let them believe they had won, right up until it cost them everything. My name is Tessa. 8 months before that cafe, I stood on a dock at dawn and identified a single wedding ring the Coast Guard pulled from the water, because that ring was all they ever found, of my husband, Adam. His sailboat came back empty. They called it a tragic accident. I had no idea it was a performance, and that I was the only person in the audience who didn't know. We had been married for 9 years. Adam was charming in the way that makes other people feel chosen. He ran a small investment firm. I taught high school art and had inherited just under $1 million when my father died. Adam always swore my money was mine, that he would never touch it. I believed him completely. That was my first mistake, and it was very far from my last. The accident happened on a clear morning in June. Adam took the boat out alone, the way he did most weekends. By noon, the Coast Guard found it drifting, sails down, his phone and wallet still in the cabin, his ring on the deck, no body. The water there is deep and cold, they told me. Sometimes the sea does not give people back, so I planned a funeral around an empty casket. 2 months later, a check arrived. Adam had a life insurance policy I half remembered signing years before. $2.4 million. I remember staring at it and feeling sick because no amount of money looks like anything but a receipt for a person you loved. I put it in the bank and did not touch a cent. I told myself I was being respectful. Part of me, I think, already knew something was wrong. The first crack was small. 3 weeks after the funeral, my bank flagged a withdrawal from an account I thought was frozen. $11,000 moved the day before Adam died. Then another from the week before. I told the woman on the phone it had to be a mistake. A dead man cannot move money. She went very quiet. And then she said the words that started everything. The transfers were authorized in person, by someone with Adam's ID and Adam's signature, at a branch 90 minutes from our house, the day before his boat came back empty. I needed there to be an explanation, because the alternative, that my husband had walked into a bank the day before he drowned and emptied an account, meant the man I had buried had known in advance that he was about to disappear. I might have talked myself out of it. Grief makes you see things that aren't there. But then my sister sent me a photo from a birthday 200 miles north, and in the blurred background, at a table by the window, was a man with Adam's jaw and Adam's exact way of sitting. I zoomed in until the picture dissolved. I told myself it was nothing, and then I drove 4 hours the next morning to prove it. I sat in my car across from that cafe for 2 days. On the second afternoon, the door opened, and my husband walked out into the sunlight. Alive. Lighter somehow, the way people look when a great weight has finally lifted. He held the door for a woman, and she laughed up at him, and I knew that laugh better than my own. It was Dana, my best friend, the maid of honor from my wedding. I want you to understand what that does to a person. In a single second, every kind thing they had said to me at the funeral turned to poison. Dana had held my hand at the empty casket. She had cried real tears. She had brought me soup for a month and called me strong. And the entire time she had been driving north on the weekends to the living, breathing man we were pretending to bury. Here is the thing that probably saved my life. I did not get out of the car. I did not scream his name across that street. I sat there with my hands shaking on the wheel, and I made myself a single promise. They had spent months building a story in which I was the grieving widow who knew nothing. For now, I decided I would let them keep it. I drove home and became a different person. By day, I was the widow, fragile and grateful and quiet. By night, I took our marriage apart, looking for the seams, and once I knew to look, they were everywhere. A storage unit I had never heard of, rented in cash. A second phone on our old bill, a number that only ever called one other number, and a name on the boat's paperwork that was not Adam's. Then I found the money, and the floor dropped out from under me. In the 18 months before he died, Adam had quietly drained my inheritance, the money from my father, the money he swore he would never touch, into a holding company I had never seen. $890,000, taken slowly in pieces, so I would never feel it leave. My dead husband had been robbing me while I slept beside him. So let me tell you where I stood. The man I buried was alive, under a name I didn't know, with my best friend and $2.4 million from his own death. He had also stolen everything my father left me. And I still could not prove the man up north was Adam, because in the eyes of the law, Adam was dead. But I had not found the worst part yet. The worst part was a single sheet of paper. It was in the storage unit, taped under a drawer. A second life insurance policy, not on Adam, on me. $3 million, taken out 14 months earlier, on my life, with the beneficiary listed as that same hidden holding company. I sat down on the concrete floor, and I finally understood the true shape of it. Adam was not finished disappearing. For the plan to ever be clean, I had to disappear too. Think about what that meant. As long as I was alive, I was the one person on earth who could look at the man up north and say, "That is my husband, and he is supposed to be dead." I was a loose thread, and men like Adam do not leave loose threads. The grieving widow was never part of their happy ending. She was simply the next tragic accident, waiting quietly to happen. I did the thing you are supposed to do. I took all of it to the police. The withdrawals, the photo, the storage unit, the policy on my own life, and I watched a tired detective look at me with something far too close to pity. A blurry photo. A policy I had technically signed. A man declared dead by the Coast Guard, with a death certificate and a paid claim. He asked me gently if I had been sleeping. The insurance company was worse. To them, a widow claiming her dead husband was alive was not a fraud report. It was a woman who did not want to return $2.4 million. The file was closed, and Dana had already been busy. Mutual friends started calling, careful and slow, asking how I was really holding up. She had told them grief had made me paranoid. She was building my reputation before I said a single word. For about a week, I believed they had won. I lay awake doing the math of my own life. He was a ghost with my money and an alibi signed by the ocean. She had everyone convinced I was unraveling. And a piece of paper said I was worth $3 million dead. I have never been so afraid or so alone. And then, in the middle of one of those sleepless nights, the fear turned into something colder and far more useful. I had been trying to prove the wrong thing. I had been trying to prove Adam was alive, but I did not need to prove he was alive. I needed him to come to me, and I knew how to make that happen, because there was one thing my dead husband still wanted, one thing he could not take without me. The money he stole sat in a holding company that, by law, still needed my signature to dissolve. So I gave them a reason to surface. Through a lawyer, I filed a quiet claim against that holding company, the one Adam believed was invisible. To anyone watching, it looked like a confused widow stumbling onto a forgotten account. But to the man up north, it was a flare fired into the night sky. The loose thread had found one of his secrets. The money was about to be frozen. Finally, he had to act. It took 9 days. Then Dana called me warm as summer, as if no time had passed. She had been so worried about me. She wanted to come by, to help me sort through Adam's old business papers, since I was so clearly overwhelmed. My best friend, who I had watched laugh in the sunlight beside my living husband, wanted to sit at my kitchen table and help me sign my stolen money away. I said yes. Of course I said yes. What Dana did not know was that I had spent those 9 days building a trap dressed as a kitchen. I had gone back to the police, but not to the tired detective. I had found the people who care enormously when $2.4 million leaves a building on a lie. The insurer's fraud investigators and the agents they answer to. A faked death to collect a policy is not a sad story. It is a federal crime. They were skeptical until I showed them the policy on my life and the withdrawals dated before the death. Then they got very quiet and very interested. By the time Dana knocked, there were 2 investigators in my neighbor's house with headphones on, a recorder taped under my table, and a wire under my sweater that I had practiced reaching for so my hands would not shake. I made coffee, 2 sugars in his old mug, just to see if she'd flinch. She did not flinch. That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty. Dana sat at my table and performed grief so beautifully I almost applauded. So I let her believe I knew far less than I did. I cried a little. I said I just wanted it over, that I was thinking of dropping the claim and giving the money back, if only someone would tell me what was really going on. And Dana, certain she had won, began to talk. She told me I was doing the right thing. She said the claim was upsetting people I did not want to upset. When I asked who, she hesitated and decided I was too broken to be a threat. She said Adam had needed a fresh start. The firm was failing, the debts were drowning him, the insurance was the only way out, and one day when it was safe, he had always meant to take care of me. She said his name out loud in my kitchen, on the record. I could have stopped there. The fraud was already on tape. But I needed the other thing, the thing that turned a sad financial crime into the reason I was afraid to sleep. So I slid that second policy across the table, the one on my life, and asked her very softly if she had known about it. And for the first time, Dana's face changed, because she had not known. Adam had taken out $3 million on my death and never told the woman helping him. That was the crack I had been waiting for, because in that moment Dana was not afraid of prison. She was afraid of him. If Adam would make his own wife disappear for $3 million, what was Dana, the only other living witness, worth to him? I did not have to convince her of anything. I just had to sit still while she did the same terrible math I had done at 3 a.m. When the investigators came through the door, Dana did not run. She asked for a deal. After that, it came apart fast, the way these things do once the first person talks. Dana gave them the new name, the town, the accounts, and the man who had helped Adam vanish. The faked death became insurance fraud, the stolen inheritance became theft, and the $3 million policy on a living woman became something the agents had an uglier word for: conspiracy. They arrested Adam outside the same cafe where I first saw him, alive, 2 sugars still in his coffee. They told me he did not run. He went very still, the way he always did when a deal turned against him, and asked if he could finish his coffee. He could not. The $2.4 million was clawed back. My $890,000 came home, and Adam, who had built an entire new life on the lie that he was dead, was finally given a new identity after all, an inmate number. Dana's cooperation kept her out of the worst of it, which I have mostly made my peace with. She lost her freedom for a while, her name, and the one thing she had traded everything to have. The man who, it turned out, had a policy on her too. They found it later. A smaller one, taken out the same month as mine. She had helped him bury one wife. He had simply been deciding which of us to keep. People ask if I feel cruel for sitting across from 2 people I had loved and letting them hang themselves with their own words. Here is the truth. I did not lie to them. I simply stopped doing the one thing they were counting on, the thing the grieving widow is always supposed to do. I stopped making it easy. I let them keep talking, and the talking is what cost them everything. If you take one thing from my story, take this. The people who hurt you most are almost never strangers. They are the ones who know exactly how you grieve, exactly what you'll believe, and exactly how quiet you'll stay to keep the peace. Their whole plan depends on you being who you have always been. The day you become someone even slightly harder to predict is the day their plan begins to fall apart. There is one more thing, and it is the part I cannot let go of. A man does not fake his own death alone. Somewhere in the files Dana handed over was the person who actually built Adam his new life. The new name, the clean papers, the bank that asked no questions. The agents would not tell me much, but they said he was a professional, that Adam was not his first, and that he went by a single name I had heard once before, years ago, at a very different funeral. Garrett. I had spent a year believing my husband was the most dangerous man I would ever cross. I was wrong. Somewhere out there is the man who makes people like Adam disappear for a living, and his work is nowhere near finished. If a story about the people we trust most kept you here until the end, then you already understand why I keep digging. Subscribe and stay close, because the next time the ground opens up beneath someone's perfect